Hello, this webinar is the Pilgrim story, Thanksgiving. Well, we've taken a look at all these interactions between Somerset, Squanto, the Cultural Exchange, Chief Massasoit, and the Peace Treaty, which all happened rather quickly in 1621 and led up to the first Thanksgiving experience. Now, the Pilgrims traditionally would have a prayer and fasting in the spring and a Thanksgiving in the fall, kind of like a harvest festival. Our modern Thanksgiving actually combines the two. In the fall of 1621, Edward Winslow wrote this: "Our harvest being gotten in, our governor sent for 4 men on fowling, that so we might, after a special manner, rejoice together after we had gathered the fruit of our labors. They 4 in one day killed as much fowl as, with a little help besides, served the company almost a week. At which time, among other recreations, we exercised our arms, many of the Indians coming among us. And among the rest, their greatest king, Massasoit," so Chief Massasoit was among them, "with some 90 men, whom for 3 days we entertained and feasted." That was quite a festival. "And they went out and killed 5 deer, which they brought to the plantation and bestowed on our governor and upon the captain and others. And although it be not always so plentiful as it was at this time with us, yet by the goodness of God we are so far from want that we often wish you partakers of our plenty." Edward Winslow, 1621. Well, after that time, unexpectedly, in November, 35 newcomers came on a ship with few provisions. A winter ration of 5 kernels of corn each preceded, and the winter was another tough, cold months to soldier through. In the summer of 1622, there was little rain from May through July. It was very hot. The new crop began to wither away, and the Pilgrims set apart a day of prayer and fasting. The day started out clear, but toward the evening the sky became overcast, and it began to rain, a gentle rain, over a few days. The corn and other crops recovered quickly. The harvest was sufficient. They would survive the winter again. And here's a picture of another Thanksgiving artist, and we're just using this as a placeholder for Thanksgiving 1622. Now, as we move into 1623, the Pilgrims began to experiment with a new economic system because they'd been through 2 winters of incredible want and need. So they began to consider how to raise more corn and obtain a better crop than they had done, so that they may not continue to endure the misery of want. At length, after much debate, the governor, with the advice of the chief among them, allowed each man to plant corn for his own household, so every family was assigned a parcel of land according to the proportion of their number, all boys and children being included under some family, and this was very successful. After that, it said that the colony never was for want, and there's actually another webinar that explores this experiment with economic systems more deeply. So Thanksgiving of 1623 was called. The harvest brought a surplus of corn. A Thanksgiving was called, and their neighbors, the Indians, were invited. 120 braves came, and again with venison and turkey. Since the Pilgrims were thanking God for the harvest and their plenty, and for their friends the Indians, let me conclude this webinar with some broader thoughts on how God has worked in the Pilgrims' lives and how they saw it. The wonder of it all. It was to the astonishment of many, and almost to the wonder of the world, that from so small a beginning such great things should ensue, as in due time was manifested, and that there should be a resting place for so many of the Lord's people here, when so sharp a scourge had come upon their own nation, England. But it was the Lord's doing, and it ought to be marvelous in our eyes." Meanwhile, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, that was some 40 miles away, was initially in much disarray. There were many adventurers there and know-it-alls, and they were failing. But they finally got their bearings, and this began to happen in 1630. And John Winthrop was a Puritan leader there and said this: "For we must consider that we shall be a city upon a hill." He was quoting Matthew 5:14 there, that says, "You are the light of the world, a city that is set on a hill that cannot be hidden." The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword through the world. We shall open the mouths of enemies to speak evil of the ways of God and all the professors for God's sake. We shall shame the faces of many of God's worthy servants, and cause their prayers to be turned into curses upon us, till we be consumed out of the good land whither we were going. And so John Winthrop was really setting a high bar for the behavior and attitude and the vision for those in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and his words obviously rippled through the Massachusetts Bay area. Well, in 1647, as we kind of wrap up this Thanksgiving webinar, to start a meal, it was said that on each plate there were just 5 kernels of corn, lest anyone forget the thanksgiving due to God Almighty for his blessings and his care. William Bradford said this, "My object is that their children may see with what difficulties their fathers had to wrestle in the accomplishing of the first beginnings, and how God ultimately brought them through." My name's Craig Seibert. Thanks for listening.